Welcome everybody to the next episode with Louis Mehl Madrona. We did a long intro to him on the last episode, but for now, it'll suffice to say that Louis is a very accomplished physician. He is an indigenous healer from Lakota and Cherokee backgrounds and does some amazing work that we're going to find out a little bit more about in healing, both from the Western perspective and from the indigenous perspective. And Louis, during this session, I'm hoping that you'll tell us a little bit about some of the people who have made a difference to you in your life, the influences that they had on you, and how that made you who you are today.
Sure. We talked last time about how I went looking for elders to help me get through medical school. And there were two fellows who were just incredibly helpful to me. One was a guy named Gila, who lived in Ukiah, California, Cherokee man. And the other one was Grandfather Roberts, who lived in Garberville. And Grandfather Roberts was a character. He was also Cherokee. I remember the first time I went to see him, he wasn't home. He told me when to come, and no one was there. And so, I pitched a tent and waited. And he came exactly 24 hours later. And he said, "Oh, you're still here?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I guess you're not all bad after all." And so that was sort of the price of admission, I guess. No one knew how old he was. He looked pretty old. There were rumors that he was really old, like 90. I don't know. But he had these two young women who were studying underneath him, and I mean that literally. And so whatever his fountain of youth was, he could have bottled it. And but he wasn't selling snake oil. But anyway, so I would go there when I could, when I had a weekend off, and drive up to Garberville and hang out with him and do ceremony. And it was really an important sort of balance to medical school. When I was in residency in Madison, Wisconsin, I found elders in Black Earth, Wisconsin, and also closer up near Hayward, Wisconsin, near Duluth, Minnesota. And, staying in touch with them was important. After I left Wisconsin, I went to Berkeley, California. And that was really my first serious sort of teacher-student relationship. And it was with an incredible woman named Marilyn Youngbird. And she lived in Aptos, California. So I would drive to her house, and I started helping her do ceremonies, carrying rocks for her, being in charge of the fire, whatever needed to be done. And Marilyn was amazing. She did a lot of work with storytelling, and she did her version, her Native American version of guided imagery visualization. And she called it putting them to sleep so that they dream like they're asleep, but they're really awake. And that was apparently one word in her language. Marilyn was a Rikara Hadatsu. But she had studied with Wallace Black Elk and a number of other teachers. So the style of ceremony that I learned from Marilyn was Black Elk family style. And I got to see some amazing healings happen around Marilyn. And Marilyn, of course, would never take credit for a healing, and she would never call herself a healer. Um, she didn't like that word, and she wouldn't speak to you if you used the dreaded word shaman. She wouldn't speak to you for a week or more. Um, and she just thought of herself as someone who provided a safe space for the medicine to work and for the spirits to mingle. And so Marilyn was really amazing. And I also hung out with some Cherokee people in Oakland, from whom I learned Cherokee bodywork. And we've talked about that in a course that Bob and I did together. And so I started with these teachers in Oakland, and then I continued with some teachers in Arizona, and also Cherokee people doing the hands-on healing of the Cherokee, which I later learned was also shared with the Shawnee and the Pawnee, and was the inspiration for Andrew Taylor Still to create American osteopathy. So, and these were some amazing people. They were they were afraid, though. They made me promise not to use their names or to tell anyone that I learned it from them until they died. So, because they were afraid people back home would get angry that they were teaching, this kind of work. But I remember, I had to one day, in order to pay my tuition, I had to put in a swamp cooler for them in Arizona, and so that was a bit steep, but anyway, so they were incredible influences on me, and and um, then I went looking for my dad, and I never found my dad in Rapid City, but I found Sonny Richards. And Sonny Richards was this amazing guy who used to be a policeman. And I'd retired from the Rapid City Police Department by the time I found him, and was doing ceremony and what we call healings, though he would never call it that. And so Sonny lived in a small box house on the outskirts of Rapid City, where a lot of other Lakota people lived, and and there was a constant stream of people coming to get what he called doctoring. That was his word, doctoring. And Sonny would have thrown you out if you used the shaman word too, or the healer word. He didn't call himself a healer. Um, and and so I hung out with Sonny and his gang for many years, traveling to Rapid City to visit them, and bringing them first to Pittsburgh, where I was working to do ceremony there and to work with people. And then when I left Pittsburgh and went to New York City, we brought them to New York City, and they couldn't believe how much garbage existed in New York City. Because they came once during a garbage strike, and so that was their image of New York City: the streets full of garbage. But Sonny introduced me to the Sundance, which has been a really powerful influence in my life. And I've been dancing now. I think it's 23 years, but I'll have to go add it up. But I think it's 23 this year, and assuming we have a Sundance this year. I think we're going to have a dance in Western New York, but maybe not in South Dakota. But it's still all up in the air. So Sonny also introduced me to an amazing guy Frank Foolscrow, who was Sonny's teacher. And he was also a guy, nobody knew how old he was. I don't think he even had a birth certificate. But he was just incredible. And Sonny introduced me also to Joe Tiona, who lived on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And Joe was an amazing. He called himself a fix-it man, not a shaman, not a healer, but a fix-it man. Because if he could fix it up, he would. And when Sonny, so when Sonny's diabetes got too bad for him to be a Sundance leader, then Sonny brought us to Joe's dance, and Joe is the leader. And I guess I want to add to the mix. So when I lived in Saskatchewan, I met this amazing fellow, John Charles. And so John Charles, I did ceremony with him whenever I could, and took people for doctoring at his place whenever I could. And he lived on Sturgeon Lake First Nation, which was west of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And John had been an Episcopal priest, an Anglican priest, they would say in Canada. And when he was 60 years old, he came down with a brain tumor. And the medical people told him he had maybe a month to live. And he didn't really like that idea. And so he decided that, he got sick despite the Christian way, and so he better turn to the Cree way. And so he found a Cree woman, who worked with him, and his tumor got misplaced somewhere. They couldn't find it. They looked all over for it, but they couldn't find it. And so that put him in a quandary, because he'd followed the Jesus way for a long time, and now he'd been healed with the Cree way. And so he went up on the hill for a vision, and he had this vision that it was all one. And so he did this drawing of Christ on the cross with elders in the four directions around him, smoking their pipe, and he put that up on a tree behind his sweat lodge. John almost killed me one day, singing the Lord's Prayer in Cree while covering me with a blanket and smoking me with sage that he put underneath the blanket on fire in a big iron kettle. But it sure did help my knee. So what doesn't kill you, I guess, makes you stronger. So John was an amazing guy. And I've met some other guys that are just amazing. Like, there's Dan Smoke in Western Ontario. And there's, I'm forgetting some people's names right now. But, wherever you go, you can find these people. And you just have to be careful not to ask for a healer or a shaman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to shift gears for a moment, if I could, Louis, and talk about the way that you get to learn. And you and I have kind of had conversations about this together in the past. But I think sometimes, when you hear about learning these medicine ways, people might have the impression that you learn them in a formal way. When I think about learning in a college setting, for example, or even in the learning that I did in curanderismo, some of my teachers took the teachings and formalized them in a way that there was a body of curriculum. But in my experiences with medicine people and ceremonial people from the North American tribes, learning takes place in a very, very different way, from showing up and from the experiences that you accrue over time. I mean, that's my experience, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how it unfolded for you and how you processed what was going on.
Well, probably from growing up in the Cherokee culture, I knew that how you do it is you show up and you show up with some sort of a gift and you hang out and you try and do odd jobs and be helpful and bring what's needed, do what's needed. If wood needs chopping, you chop wood. If they need some stones, you go out and gather stones. You just do what needs to be done, and and don't ask questions. That's a huge rule in North America. Just stay alert and watch what everyone's doing and do what everyone else is doing, and don't act like a white person, basically. So don't ask questions, and at the right time, when you least expect it, they'll sit down and give you a teaching. And you won't even notice it at first. And then like halfway through, you'll think, oh my God, I'm getting a teaching. But don't act stupid. Don't let on that you just realized you're getting a teaching. Just be nonchalant and take it as it comes, and and say thank you, Uncle, at the end. So there's a funny humor though, that part of not acting like a white person is making jokes, and I was at a gathering with this other amazing guy. Rod is his name, and Rod is just an incredible healer, though he wouldn't call himself that. And so anyway, some people who were not native wanted to introduce me to this very powerful medicine man, and so they took me up, very solemnly and with this sort of deep respect, and they said, Rod, we want to introduce you to someone. And I said, hey, Rod, it's me, Lewis. Weren't we in jail together in Gallup? And he said, no, it was Albuquerque. It was that damn jail in Albuquerque. And these guys were they were white as a sheet. They were like, what? And, I don't know if they ever figured out that we were joking.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because laughter and humor in general is so much a part of the medicine in my experience, and so much of building the kind of rapport that is going to get you in the circumstances to learn is based on your ability to understand the humor and participate in it.
Yeah. And to enjoy becoming the brunt of the jokes.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Because that's how you know that you've been accepted, when they start making jokes about you.
Exactly. I'll tell you a quick story. So as you know, for many years, I had an organization where I would take people out into different parts of Indian country, and we would live for a week at a time in different places in Indian country. And I had a staff of people working for me who were native for a program that we did in Oklahoma. And the people in my group had shown up, and I hadn't seen these friends of mine and the staff that was working for me. I hadn't seen them in about 9 months. And we showed up, the whole group showed up at the encampment. And the three of them just grilled me. It was like one joke after another, and I was the brunt of every one of them. And I looked around, and everybody had their mouths open because they were astounded. They were like, their attitude was like, you're in charge here. How could you let these people talk this way to you? And I had to gently kind of try to explain, this is just the way it goes. This is the way that we interact with each other. Yeah. And don't worry, they'll get it back from me eventually too.
Right.
But laughter is great medicine. I think that's a point that we can make. And so is silence. You talked about showing up and just being there. And there is so much learning that just goes on as a result of being in the presence of these people, these elders who have a lifetime of knowledge. I mean, my experience is that they taught me as much in silence as they did in speaking. Just being with them, being honored with being with these people.
And learning with your eyes instead of your ears.
Yeah.
Is really useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. So Louis, this is going to bring us to the close of our second interview. I'm hoping that everybody listening now will tune in for the next episode, where we're going to talk about healing modalities and the work that Louis is currently doing as I hesitate to use the word healer, but how about somebody who doctors people who need help?
All right. Somebody who hangs out with people who say they need help.
There you go. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening. Please tune in the next time to hear some more words of wisdom from Louis Mehl Madrona. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
This has been Cultures of Health and Healing with Robert Vetter. Thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe and rate this show and share it with others. Until next time, remember, your health and healing matter, and you can find your own unique path to optimum wellness.